This is Fred Fredburger. He enters every scene the same way. Too loud, too close, and already emotionally overwhelmed. His voice doesn't ask for permission. His presence doesn't negotiate. He simply arrives, like a fire alarm that no one installed and no one knows how to turn off. At first glance, Fred looks like comic relief in its purest form. Big eyes, big mouth, zero volume control. He laughs too hard, cries too fast, and screams as if the concept of inside voice never existed in his universe. The show presents him as a joke you're supposed to get instantly and move on from just as fast. But that's the trick. Fred isn't loud because he's confident. Fred isn't chaotic because he's free. Fred is loud because he's terrified of what happens if he stops making noise. Fred Fredburger exists in a permanent state of emotional emergency. Everything is either the best thing that has ever happened to him or the worst possible outcome imaginable. There is no middle ground. There is no calm. There is no moment where his nervous system gets to rest. And that's important because Billy and Mandy is not a gentle universe. This is a world ruled by sarcasm, cruelty, and characters who survive by emotional detachment. Grim copes through apathy. Mandy dominates through silence. Even Billy, as stupid as he is, exists in a blissful ignorance that protects him from fear. Fred has none of that. He feels everything at full volume, all the time. He reacts before he understands. He panics before he processes. His personality isn't annoying by accident. It's built from raw anxiety, social unawareness, and an almost childlike desperation to be accepted. Fred wants friends. Fred wants approval. Fred wants safety. And unfortunately for him, he wants these things in a universe that responds to need with punishment. That's why Fred doesn't feel like he belongs anywhere. Every room he enters tightens. Every character he meets braces for impact. The joke isn't just that Fred is irritating, it's that his very existence disrupts the emotional balance of everyone around him. Fred Fredburger is what happens when pure, unfiltered emotion collides with a world that has no patience for it. And this is only the beginning. Fred does not experience life the way other characters do. For most people in the Billy and Mandy universe, existence is manageable. Grim complains. Mandy observes. Billy drifts through reality like a human screensaver. They react after things happen. Fred reacts before anything even starts. His default emotional setting is panic. Every sound is too loud. Every pause feels suspicious. Every interaction carries the unspoken threat that something horrible is about to happen, and Fred's body knows it, even when his brain doesn't. That's why he screams. That's why he repeats himself. That's why his joy always sounds one breath away from terror. Fred doesn't laugh because he's happy. He laughs because laughter is louder than fear. When Fred enters a scene, he immediately escalates it. Not because the situation is dangerous, but because he is already in survival mode. His nervous system is constantly pulling the fire alarm when the building is perfectly fine. And here's the cruel part. The universe keeps proving him right. In Billy and Mandy, bad things happen suddenly. Pain is casual. Humiliation is comedy. Characters get hurt, mocked, erased, or traumatized without warning, and everyone else shrugs it off. Fred can't. He absorbs every threat as if it's personal, immediate, and fatal. So his fear isn't irrational. It's just early. Fred is always emotionally one step ahead of disaster, even when disaster never comes. He anticipates rejection before it happens. He panics before he's judged. He screams before anyone decides whether they're annoyed or amused. That constant anticipation is exhausting. There is no reset button for Fred, no moment where he calms down and says, "Okay, maybe things are fine." His emotions don't cool, they loop. Anxiety feeds excitement. Excitement feeds noise. Noise feeds rejection. Rejection feeds more anxiety. Fred is trapped in a feedback loop where volume replaces safety. And the worst part, the louder he gets, the less sympathy he receives, which means the more scared he becomes. By the time anyone reacts to Fred, he's already drowning in a panic that started long before the scene did, and this sets the stage for everything that comes next. Fred's biggest problem isn't his volume. It's the environment he exists in. The Billy and Mandy universe is not designed for emotional people. It rewards cruelty, indifference, and dominance. Pain is funny. Discomfort is entertainment. Empathy is optional at best and actively punished at worst. Fred is the opposite of everything this world respects. He doesn't hide what he feels. He doesn't control his reactions. He doesn't play it cool. And the universe responds accordingly. When Fred shows up, nobody thinks, "How can we help?" They think, "How long until this stops?" Billy tolerates Fred, but only because Billy barely understands what's happening around him. Grimm finds Fred irritating and beneath notice. Everyone else reacts with frustration, mockery, or immediate hostility. Fred isn't welcomed, he's endured. Every interaction reinforces the same message. You are too much. Too loud, too emotional, too weird, too present. Fred doesn't just fail to fit in, he actively disrupts the emotional economy of every scene. His fear makes other characters uncomfortable. His excitement feels invasive. His desperation exposes how little patience the world has for sincerity. And so the punishment begins. Fred gets yelled at, he gets threatened, he gets ignored, he gets humiliated, sometimes all at once. And because this is a cartoon universe, that punishment is exaggerated for laughs. His suffering is quick, loud, and instantly dismissed. The moment passes, the joke lands, and the world moves on, leaving Fred behind, emotionally wrecked and completely alone. That's the real cruelty. Fred feels the consequences long after everyone else has forgotten them. The universe doesn't teach Fred to be quieter. It teaches him that being himself is dangerous. So he doubles down. He gets louder, more frantic, more desperate to be liked, which only makes the rejection worse. Fred is caught in a vicious cycle where every attempt at connection pushes people further away. The harder he tries to exist openly, the more the world pushes back. There is no safe space for him, no neutral ground where his emotions are allowed to breathe. Fred doesn't belong anywhere, and the universe makes sure he knows it, which is exactly why, sooner or later, he was always going to run into Mandy. Fred is afraid of many things: loud noises, sudden movements, social rejection, silence that lasts just a second too long. But none of those compare to Mandy, because Mandy doesn't shout, she doesn't threaten, she doesn't react. She waits. In a world full of exaggerated expressions and cartoon chaos, Mandy is an absence, an emotional void shaped like a child. Where everyone else explodes outward, Mandy collapses inward, reducing every situation to a quiet judgment. And Fred feels that judgment instantly. The moment Mandy enters a scene, Fred's panic changes shape. His noise becomes sharper. His excitement becomes forced. He laughs louder, faster, as if volume alone might fill the space Mandy leaves behind. It never works. Mandy doesn't need to insult Fred. She doesn't need to hurt him. She doesn't even need to acknowledge him. Her silence does all the damage. Fred lives in a constant need for feedback. He requires reactions to confirm that he still exists, that he hasn't crossed some invisible line. Mandy offers nothing. No reassurance, no anger, no amusement. Just a stare that suggests she has already calculated the outcome, and Fred did not survive it. This is why Mandy is terrifying to Fred in a way no monster ever could be. Monsters chase you. Mandy evaluates you. And Fred knows deep down that he fails that evaluation instantly. Mandy represents everything Fred cannot be. Controlled, self-contained, emotionally untouchable. She doesn't beg for acceptance because she assumes dominance. She doesn't seek comfort because she doesn't need it. Her power comes from restraint, the exact thing Fred lacks. Standing near Mandy, Fred becomes hyper-aware of every flaw he has ever displayed. Every scream feels louder. Every laugh feels wrong. Every attempt to connect feels like a mistake he should have known better than to make. So he spirals. The presence of Mandy doesn't calm Fred down. It strips him bare. In her silence, Fred hears every insecurity he's been screaming to drown out. And for the first time, noise doesn't protect him, it exposes him. Mandy doesn't chase Fred away, she simply allows him to collapse under the weight of his own existence. And that makes her the most dangerous thing he's ever faced. Mandy doesn't torment Fred the way a villain would. She doesn't yell at him. She doesn't chase him. She doesn't even seem particularly interested in hurting him, which is exactly why she destroys him. Fred is a creature that survives on response. He needs noise to bounce off other people. He needs reactions to reassure him that he's still part of the scene, still relevant, still allowed to exist. Mandy denies him all of that with surgical precision. She gives him nothing. When Fred screams, Mandy doesn't flinch. When Fred laughs, Mandy doesn't smile. When Fred panics, Mandy doesn't rush in or pull away. She just watches. And that gaze is unbearable. Because in that silence, Fred is forced to confront something he spends his entire existence avoiding. The possibility that his emotions don't matter to anyone but himself. Mandy doesn't validate his fear, but she doesn't challenge it either. She lets it sit in the open, exposed and embarrassing. Fred isn't scared of Mandy because she's cruel. He's scared because she's honest. Mandy never pretends Fred is charming. She never pretends he's funny. She never pretends his behavior is acceptable. Her presence turns Fred's volume into evidence. Every scream becomes proof of weakness. Every outburst feels childish under her stare. Mandy doesn't shame him actively, she lets him shame himself. This creates a uniquely psychological form of suffering. Fred starts anticipating Mandy's judgment even when she's not there. He adjusts his behavior preemptively, fails anyway, and spirals faster than before. Mandy becomes an internal voice, a constant reminder that no amount of noise will turn him into someone worthy of respect. In a universe where pain is often physical and exaggerated, Mandy's damage is subtle and permanent. She doesn't break bones, she breaks confidence. She doesn't attack Fred's body, she dismantles the illusion that being loud will protect him. And Fred feels it. That's why his panic spikes around Mandy. That's why his jokes get worse. That's why his screaming feels more desperate than joyful. Mandy doesn't escalate Fred's chaos, she reveals it. Fred's worst fear isn't being hurt, it's being seen clearly. And Mandy sees everything. Fred's suffering isn't a side effect of the joke. It is the joke. Every time Fred appears, the structure is the same. He enters with enthusiasm that is slightly too intense, slightly too loud, slightly too desperate. The world reacts with irritation. The scene escalates. Fred is punished, socially, emotionally, sometimes physically, and the punchline lands. Then everything resets, except Fred. The comedy of Billy and Mandy is ruthless, but it's also efficient. Characters get hurt, mocked, and discarded in service of a laugh, and the show moves on without apology. Most characters are built to survive that. They're emotionally flat, narratively protected, or too detached to care. Fred is none of those things. He feels the humiliation fully. When Fred is mocked, he doesn't shrug it off. When he's rejected, he doesn't grow numb. The embarrassment sticks to him, clings to his voice, bleeds into the next moment. His reactions get louder because the shame never fades. It accumulates. And that's what makes it funny. The audience laughs because Fred reacts too much. His misery is exaggerated. His panic is theatrical. His despair is wrapped in a ridiculous voice and an absurd design. The show disguises emotional collapse as slapstick. Fred becomes a safe target. He is annoying enough that the audience feels justified laughing at him. He is cartoonish enough that his pain doesn't feel real. And he is loud enough that silence, the moment where we might question what's happening, never arrives. So the humiliation loops. Fred is introduced. Fred overreacts. Fred is punished. The audience laughs. Repeat. What makes this especially cruel is that Fred never earns the punishment. He doesn't scheme. He doesn't manipulate. He doesn't hurt anyone intentionally. His crime is existing incorrectly, being too expressive in a world that prefers emotional restraint. Comedy doesn't ask whether Fred deserves what happens to him. Comedy just needs him to scream. And Fred obliges, because screaming is all he has left. This is the unspoken contract of his existence. He will suffer loudly, and we will enjoy it quietly. His humiliation becomes entertainment precisely because it is endless and unresolved. Fred never learns. Fred never adapts. Fred never escapes the role. He is not a character with an arc. He is a reaction, and reactions don't get happy endings. Fred is not a character built for stability. He is an exposed nerve with legs. Everything about Fred suggests a system pushed far past its limits. His voice cracks between excitement and fear. His movements are erratic. His reactions arrive before his thoughts. Nothing about him feels grounded because nothing is grounded. Fred doesn't process emotions, he broadcasts them. This makes him a walking emotional hazard in a universe that survives by suppression. Where other characters compress their feelings into sarcasm, cruelty, or apathy, Fred lets everything spill out at once. Anxiety, joy, confusion, hope, terror, all stacked on top of each other, screaming for attention. And that's why he feels so familiar. Fred is the physical embodiment of overstimulation. He is what happens when your internal monologue escapes containment, when every thought is external, when every emotion demands immediate expression because holding it in feels unbearable. He can't regulate. He can't pause. He can't filter. So he melts down constantly. But because this is a cartoon, his meltdowns are framed as humor. His breakdowns are loud and colorful and ridiculous. The show translates emotional overload into noise, turning something genuinely distressing into a spectacle designed for laughter. That transformation is key. Fred's suffering becomes palatable because it's exaggerated. His anxiety is wrapped in absurdity. His fear is coded in volume. We're not meant to empathize, we're meant to react. And yet, somewhere underneath the screaming, there's a recognizable truth. Fred isn't broken because he's weak. He's broken because he feels too much in a world that demands less. His emotions don't make him dangerous, they make him vulnerable. And vulnerability in Billy and Mandy is a liability. It marks you as a target. It invites correction through mockery, silence, or punishment. So Fred keeps melting down, not because he enjoys it, but because it's the only way he knows how to exist. Every scream is an attempt to stay afloat. Every laugh is a defense mechanism. Every overreaction is a desperate signal that he is overwhelmed and doesn't know how to stop. Fred isn't a joke about being loud. He's a joke about what happens when emotional regulation fails completely, and no one cares enough to help. Most characters, even in cruel cartoon universes, are allowed one mercy. They change. They learn. They adapt. They grow numb. Fred does none of these things. There is no lesson waiting for him at the end of his suffering, no moment where the noise quiets and he suddenly understands how to survive in this world. Fred is not on a journey. He is stuck in a loop. He enters loud, he panics, he is rejected, he exits louder than before, and the loop resets. The show never offers Fred an opportunity to improve because improvement would end the joke. If Fred learned restraint, he would stop being funny. If he gained self-awareness, the screaming would slow down. If he found peace, the audience would have nothing to laugh at. So Fred is denied growth by design. Every appearance reinforces the same emotional reality. Fred is exactly who he was the last time you saw him, and he will be exactly the same the next time he shows up. His fear does not harden into resilience. His embarrassment does not turn into caution. His panic does not teach him silence. Nothing sticks. And that's the most exhausting part of his existence. Fred remembers just enough to be hurt again, but never enough to protect himself. He carries emotional scars with no coping mechanisms. Each humiliation leaves residue, not wisdom. Each rejection deepens the panic, but never clarifies it. He feels consequences without gaining insight, pain without progress. There is no escape hatch for Fred. He can't lower the volume, he can't leave the environment, he can't change how others see him. Even silence is unavailable to him, because silence would require control, and control is the one thing Fred will never have. So he keeps screaming into the void, hoping this time the noise will turn into acceptance, hoping this time the reaction will be different, hoping this time the universe will meet him halfway. It never does. Fred's existence is not tragic because bad things happen to him. It's tragic because nothing he does can ever change the outcome. Fred's misery is loud, absurd, and emotionally ignorable, and that's exactly why we laugh. The audience isn't laughing with Fred, they're laughing at him, at the pure chaos of his existence, at the volume of his panic, at the hopelessness that clings to every scene he enters. Fred doesn't cause disaster on purpose, he causes disaster because he is disaster. And in a universe where every reaction is exaggerated for comedic effect, his personal suffering becomes entertainment. We laugh because it's safe. Fred experiences the full emotional spectrum at maximum volume, but we, the viewers, do not. We watch the panic from a comfortable distance, detached and amused. There is a bizarre catharsis in observing someone completely unprepared for the world's indifference, someone entirely unshielded from judgment and humiliation. Fred embodies that extreme, and our laughter is a coping mechanism as much as a reaction to absurdity. Fred's noise, his overreactions, his desperation, it's all a mirror of the anxiety many of us feel but mask in polite society. We recognize the panic, but in Fred it's amplified, distorted, cartoonish, and therefore funny. The exaggeration lets us laugh at the horror of existence without actually experiencing it ourselves. And yet the joke is cruel. Because Fred never stops. Every attempt to adapt, to appease, or to escape backfires. His loudness and panic are both the cause and the consequence of his suffering. Every laugh we give him is a tiny reinforcement of his endless loop of chaos. Comedy, in Fred's case, is built entirely on humiliation. He does not evolve. He does not grow. He does not learn. The audience's laughter is only a temporary balm, while Fred continues to exist exactly the same way, screaming and panicking, as if each episode were both the first and the 100th time he has made the same mistakes. Fred's suffering is our entertainment. Fred's panic is our release. Fred's existence is our cartoonish reminder that life is loud, chaotic, and often unfair, and sometimes there's nothing left to do but laugh. In the end, we laugh because Fred cannot stop screaming, and Fred cannot exist. That is the cruel perfection of it all. So, what have we learned about Fred Fredburger? He isn't just a loud, obnoxious cartoon character. He is a walking, screaming embodiment of emotional chaos. Fred exists in a world that punishes sincerity and rewards detachment. Every interaction, every reaction, every outburst is met with mockery, indifference, or silent judgment. The universe does not bend for him. The characters around him do not soften. Even the occasional friend is too inept or apathetic to protect him. Mandy, the ultimate arbiter of this universe, makes it worse. She doesn't yell, she doesn't chase, she doesn't need to. Her presence alone exposes Fred's flaws, his lack of control, and his constant panic. Every scream he utters, every laugh he forces, every flailing attempt to connect becomes proof that he will never belong, never adapt, and never escape the loop of chaos that defines him. Fred Fredburger is trapped in a cycle of noise and humiliation where nothing he does can change the outcome. There is no character growth, no escape, no silence. Only screaming, only panic, only the endless reminder that the world does not care about him, and the one person who could judge him worst, Mandy, always does, even silently. And that's why we laugh. Not because Fred is evil or mean or malicious. We laugh because we recognize the absurdity of suffering amplified to a cartoonish degree. We laugh because we feel safe observing someone endure what we hope we never have to experience. And we laugh because Fred's chaos is relentless, unfiltered, and endlessly entertaining. Fred is not just a character. He is a warning. Exist loudly, exist fully, exist honestly, and watch the universe respond with indifference, mockery, or silent judgment. Fred Fredburger. He screams, he panics, he suffers, and we laugh. So, if you enjoyed watching Fred scream through existence, don't stop here. Like, subscribe, and comment which cartoon character should suffer next, because misery loves company, and so do we.